Okay, it has just turned 4 o'clock here in the UK where I am based, so we get started at this Trinity College London Transformative Teachers webinar. Welcome back, everyone. I can see some new people here, but also lots of old names, familiar names, which is great to see. I hope you enjoyed your summer break for those that have had it. Um, as always, a really international group of peers joining us this evening or this morning or the afternoon, because we know it's very international. So I should say good morning and good evening to everyone as well. The kind of countries coming in here include Yemen, Greece, Taiwan, Pakistan, India, Romania, Scotland, Algeria, Thailand, Persia, Turkey, the UK, where I'm based, and many, many, many more. So it's great to have you all here for today's webinar. As usual, before I hand over to our speaker, I'm just going to do a tiny bit of housekeeping. So a reminder that we're going to be here today for about 1 hour, and our speaker will probably speak for about 45 to 50 minutes, and there will be time at the end for questions. This entire session is being recorded, so if you have to drop out for any reason, internet connections or other things that you've got to do, don't worry, we will send a recording of this to you and it will be up on the Transformative Teachers webinar website in the future. Play around with all the settings to make sure you can see the best view depending on the device that you are using. And do keep interacting. It's been a very busy chat box so far while we waited. You can see that the chat box moves quite quickly because there are lots of us here today. So if you do have an urgent question that you would like answered, it might be better to use the Q&A box, which will be somewhere down the bottom or on the side. That won't disappear. And as I said, there'll be time at the end of this session for us to ask questions. And finally, we will be sending you a report, a certificate of attendance after this. You should receive that within about a week of this webinar. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and introduce now our speaker. I'm very pleased that we can be joined today by Rasheedat Sadiq, who is a language teacher and program coordinator in Abuja in Nigeria. And among many, many other things, if you follow her on any social media, you'll know that she's incredibly busy. But on top of everything else, she runs a mobile library called the Mobile Reading Room, which gives children in underserved areas access to books. And she gives instruction as well on how a wide range of comprehension strategies. And that's what she's here to talk to us about today, harnessing the power of storytelling in the English language classroom. So welcome and over to you.
Hi, Simon. Thank you very much. And welcome to everyone from all over the world. It's awesome to be here. Yeah, I'm so excited. And let's start. We want to talk about storytelling. And I believe that storytelling is a very, very powerful tool. I believe that everybody loves stories, either folk tales, personal tales. We all love stories in one way or the other. Even just coming back home to discuss with those we left at home, we're going to be telling them stories of our day. So today we're going to start by looking into why we should use stories in the classroom and the different forms of storytelling. We're going to look at storytelling and the 4 language skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. We'd also look at how to adapt storytelling for different demographics and different types of stories we could use, and some activities before we conclude. Now, I'd like to crave your indulgence. Simon did say that we should all be active. I would really, really want you to come in with your storytelling mind, because I'd be wanting you to tell me some stories, and I will be telling you a story too. So it's story time. Before I start my story, I'd like to give you a task. I will be treating you as my learners and as teachers at the same time. So I'm going to put some questions in the chat box. Some of those questions are asking you to put on your teacher cap, while others are asking you to put on your student cap. So please find whichever cap fits and put it on. Okay, so the title of my story is Dinner Party. Dinner Party. All right, so please go through the questions in the chat box. The first question says, What do you think the story is about? Do you think it'll have a happy or sad ending? While you're listening, write down the adjectives you hear. And finally, what language function can be taught with the story? The dinner party. As students, I'd like you to look at me and copy my actions. We're going to learn a few new words. The first one is cut, cut. The second one is chop, chop. Hope you're doing it. I can't see you, but I hope you're doing it. The third word is pour, pour. The fourth one is mix, mix. And the final one is stir, stir. Great, I'm getting some feedback. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Angela. Thank you, Fatima. Yeah, we're all on the right track. Thank you, Madalena. I hope we got the words. These are some words that we're going to be hearing in the story titled The Dinner Party. Well, a while back when I was in university, I wanted to cook and eat stir-fried rice. I didn't really know how to do it, so I decided to check on YouTube. And I was able to get different recipes for stir-fried rice on YouTube. The recipe served 3 people. It was for only me, but I wasn't sure about dividing anything, so I bought the ingredients for 3 people. On the day, one beautiful weekend, I decided to cook. So I cut up some meat and I cooked it. I chopped up some carrots and I put it aside. I sliced the onions that were going to go in the rice. I mixed the ingredients, tomatoes, peppers, different spices. And then I started the stir fry. After some time, I poured in the rice. I continued stirring and it was going so well. The last thing I wanted to add was salt. The recipe said to add a teaspoon of salt. But in my excitement, I guess, I picked up a tablespoon and I added a tablespoon of salt. Oh my, what do you think would happen next? Yeah, I was confused. I wasn't sure what to do. So I went back to YouTube and I asked what to do if you add too much salt. There were so many suggestions and I didn't have some of the things they asked me to use, but I decided that to settle the taste, I could add in more rice. I had a lot of rice. So I transferred the food from the small pot I was using into a big pot. And I continued to stir fry. And the rice seemed to grow. It was swelling until the pot was full. Now I had enough food to serve 20 people. What was I going to do? So I decided that I would be giving my roommate some rice. And I decided to knock on the doors of those in the dorm with me. Hello, would you like to come for dinner? I have stir-fried rice. Yes, that would be nice, thank you, said the first neighbor. I went to the next door. Hello, would you like to come for dinner with me? I have some stir-fried rice. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going out for dinner. I can't come. Hello, would you like some stir-fried rice? I asked at a point after deciding to pack some of the rice into the tiny Tupperware bowls that my mom had sent me. So I went from door to door to door to door, asking people to come for dinner and asking people if they would want some packs of stir-fried rice. At the end of the day, I was able to get about 10 people to join me in my tiny dorm room, and it was a bit cramped, but we had a lot of fun. The food, how did it taste? Well, it was nice enough for me. I'm not sure what the owner of the recipe would have thought of it. The end. All right, so that's the end of my story. And I've been seeing so many beautiful, answers in the chats, synonyms, giving instructions, imperatives, recipes. Yeah, so much stuff. Sequencing, past tense, quantitatives. Oh, someone said add potatoes. That was some of the stuff I saw. I didn't have potatoes. Conditionals. Okay, what to do if. Yeah. Connectors. Thank you. Thank you. Vocabulary of cooking. Offering. Would you like? Yes. 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 And yes. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Fatima. I enjoy telling the story too. Okay, so we're going to go back to the slides. And I hope you enjoyed my story. And I want to believe that we've seen some of the practical ways we could actually use stories to support our learners to learn language. And we'll be looking at a few more. Okay, so why should we use storytelling? Why is it important? One of the pictures here says storytelling is the best marketing. And that's just it. If you want the learners to learn, you need to sell the lesson to them. And storytelling does this because it uses authentic language, language that they're going to meet every day, that they understand. And it has a plot, it has something that holds them. It also is kind of universal. Every community has its own traditional tales and folk tales, and there's always a natural learning context. So it's a way for learners to learn without being too didactic. It's really good. Stories are engaging, especially if you're able to infuse some activity for the learners to do while they're listening. But even if you don't, just that plot, just carrying them through the story is so engaging. They're on the edge of their seat. They're expecting the outcome of the story. And there's a lot of neuroscience regarding storytelling and the release of dopamine and cortisol and oxytocin. But I wouldn't go into that today, but just know that it does engage and it creates bonds. So we're talking about the oxytocin and just having that shared experience within a classroom or even online is a lot of bonding. And just like I said, there's something called neural coupling that kind of posits that our brain cells become joined when we're listening to a story together, when we have a shared experience. It does improve numerous cognitive processes like visualization, sequencing. I think someone mentioned that, critical thinking. I had you thinking, and someone said to me, add potatoes. And if you didn't know, people would have just suggested different things if I'd had enough time to just wait and ask you to suggest to me what I should do with the pot of food. Promotes creativity. You can be as creative as you want when you're telling a story. Storytelling builds self-concept and confidence because you are in a relaxed atmosphere when you're telling a story and you allow the learners to tell their own stories. So everybody likes to share stuff about themselves. We are the most important person to us. So giving that opportunity to share our lives, our customs, our cultures, our folk tales definitely does support the learner in the classroom. Stories are suitable for all ages. Some people argue with me about that, but I found over the years that I've been working that everybody loves a story. Once you find the type of story that they like, they're going to appreciate it and they're going to learn through it. And storytelling is accessible to everyone. Even those that have special educational needs can have stories told in different forms to them. So storytelling is really, really something that is wonderful. And I want everyone here to be able to use stories in their classroom after this session. Okay, right. So I'm going to ask you another question. Please put in the chat some of the forms of storytelling that you know, and I'll be reading out for them. And I love that, we're all teachers here. We're here to learn from each other. Theano says fairy tales. Yes. Yes, thank you. It explains abstract concepts in a very practical way. So true of stories. Thank you for that. Anecdotes, yes. Oh, now it's going so fast. Photography, change stories, personal stories. Good, good, good. Film, interesting. Biographies, film. I'm actually so excited that a number of us put film here because it's something that is often overlooked. Yeah, oral stories, jokes, vlogs, podcasts. Yeah, so we have so many tools that we can use to tell stories, real stories, memories, novels, ballads, short stories, songs, poetry. Nice, nice role play. So yeah, we have it all. And I think we even have more than I got. So I'm just going to share some of the ones that I use. So broadly, I see three main types, but all of these other forms can come in. So we have oral storytelling, and that's verbally narrating a story. That's the way we started. We know that human beings are very oral. We had oral narrations passed down through generations until we got the science of writing right. And the beautiful part of storytelling is that it involves a lot. It involves music, it involves singing, it involves props. All of that are components of oral storytelling. So that's an easy one, and we're not going to spend too much time on that. Excuse me. So the next one is visual storytelling. And I think I did see some allusions to that. And film would be part of visual storytelling. This is the art of using images to tell a story. So they could be still images or they could be moving images. They could be movies. I have some questions here. This is a very beautiful picture. I got it all off Canva. All the images here, or almost all the images here are from Canva. And I'd just like you to look at the questions I have for you. And just in 2 or 3 sentences, I think it's possible to tell a 3-sentence story. Can you tell a personal story related to this image? So this is a task you could give your learners. If any of them has ever been on a boat, on the beach, or even just watched a movie about boats, they would have something to say. Aha, when I was a pirate. Kamishibe, I'm not sure what that is. Is that a story? Kamishibe, I'd love to know. Video games, yes. When I sailed a boat with a friend of mine. Yes, yes. Visual prompts for writing. And it doesn't only have to be for writing. It could be for oral telling. It could be for writing. Okay, so another one would be describe the setting of the picture. So now we're focusing on setting. So describing the picture. And that is writing, but it's related to writing. It could also be a verbal description, but here we're getting the learners to just relate what is here to what they've seen and just create a tale. And the last one, write a short story. Oops. Write a short story from this image. So yeah, we already got people writing nice stories. Farewell, my homeland. The first time I went to London with my friends and went to the National Gallery, that's a nice personal experience. Okay, I spent a wonderful afternoon in the Ligurian Sea. That is beautiful. That is so beautiful. So our learners could do this. They could do something really short that you could do at the beginning of the class, 10 minutes, or it could be a longer thing, a whole story. Okay, another beautiful one for visual storytelling is using pictures to create memes. And I wanted us to try this out. So what caption would you give some of these? So I'll start out with mine. A is me looking at my students when they're going off task. That's just me. Okay. So my first day as a teacher, pair, is that for A, B, or C? Okay, thank you. I'm seeing some of the stories still coming in. That's fine. Maybe for coffee, I guess that's A. Oh, I told you not to touch me. Yeah, yeah. C, Super Mario becomes a delivery driver. Good. A very long morning, class A. Yeah, nice. Oh, jollof rice is finished. I did not. Okay, when I don't know the answer, my first day at the workplace. Awesome, awesome. C is teachers driving home when it's time for summer break. That's what I would have. All right, excellent, excellent. So these are just beautiful things that we got to do. Got us thinking. So that's critical thinking is there. That we're forming our thoughts into words, and we're being as funny and as excited as we want to be. And some of us are just being matter of fact, and it's fine. Pay increase, yes, I would probably laugh like that if I got a pay increase. Okay. Oh, I love all of these. So there's so many things that we can do, and we can get pictures just off anywhere. We can even take our own pictures and ask the learners to create memes, to make this picture into a character, create a full-fledged story around the character, just different things, but that's visual storytelling. Okay, the next one is digital storytelling, which I think is also relatively related to the visual, but it adds a bit more. So it's the process of using video, images, audio, music, apps, and other digital media to create a story. And this is really fun to do. I recently did one with my learners, and it was really exciting. A bit tough because it was a first time for us, but it's something that excited them because they were teenagers, year nines, and it was really nice. So some of the tools that we could use: Canva, PowerPoint, CapCut, InShot, Adobe, Powtoons, even TikTok. I had a learner use TikTok to create a digital story. So we're moving on. The next one, which I think is also related to visual storytelling, is what is called data storytelling. So I found this in some of my research, and I just thought to myself, well, this is IELTS. This is the task one test. So we're telling a story. And if you look at it that way, it becomes more interesting. So for those of us that are teaching more advanced learners, we could introduce them to data storytelling. So this is a chart, and I'd like to just take some time here to pause and listen to what you have to say, or read what you have to say. What story does this chart tell you? I'd like some answers in the chats, please. And I'm so happy that you're also engaged. Yes, digital storytelling is multimodal. Hmm. Okay, introducing the data as shocking information. Yes, yes, that's also a way. Okay, way more girls go to school by 2015. That's an interesting story. Storytelling from 1995 through 2015. Yes. So we could start asking more questions from these short sentences that you're telling me from the story. Like why? Why are more girls going to school? Why was there a dip in 2010 of the boys going to school? What happened to the bus in 2010? Thank you. That was just it. Spreading education. Yeah. Is the data worldwide? Okay, that's another question that we should ask. So this chart is actually missing some information because it should say, and normally with the IELTS, for example, they would say graph of showing boys and girls attending school in Europe or in Africa or in a particular country. Boys are internalized to be risk takers and they grow to be confident. I'm not sure we can tell that story from this chart, but yeah, why do boys love to learn more? That's a story. Out of school children chart. Interest in storytelling. Okay, so it actually says number attending school, so it is there. It's more about attendance. Boys are persistently increasing in school. So those are beautiful stories, and they're all correct. And then from these stories, we can ask questions and we can have discussions within our classrooms. Now, this is not an IELTS test. If it was, we would probably have more to the question and would have more to say so that we could write at least 150 words for the test. But these are some of the tools that you can use to engage the learners before you get into the technicalities of writing IELTS test one. And I've done the IELTS. I must be truthful. That was kind of the most daunting for me. Like so many charts and bar graphs. But if you look at it as a story, then you just enjoy the process. So there's data storytelling, which I would say is a part of visual storytelling. Okay, so we have some other forms of storytelling, but they all may also form into one or the other. We have written storytelling, we have interactive storytelling, and that's also done in many different ways. You could ask your learners to chant along with you. You could have a call and response. You could have where they're co-creating the story. That's also interactive. I did a session once with Stanley Graham where he talked about interactive storytelling, also very good. We have transmedia storytelling, which is also very interesting, where the same stories appearing in different media. So we have the Marvel comics as a very, very good example, where you have the comic book, and then you have the movies, and then you have the video game. So there's a lot. There's also immersive storytelling. With this, I think we're looking more at augmented reality and virtual reality, but you don't even have to be that high tech to have an immersive storytelling session. So creating a mood within your classroom. If I turned out all the lights in my class, if I put on some mood music while I'm telling a story, it becomes more immersive. There's the musical storytelling and there's sound storytelling. Now, sound storytelling is something that I love. I gave it that name, but I saw it on it's an I'm trying to remember where I found it. So I didn't create it, but I found an article where we had to tell a story from listening to sounds. So we're going to try that out now. I'm going to play 3 sounds for us, and I want us to create a 3, 4 sentence story from the sounds we hear. So based on the sounds you hear, what happened? That's basically what I want. So for example, if I asked what sounds you heard this morning and you said, oh, you heard an owl, you heard a bird tweeting by your window, and then you heard the kettle boiling, and you heard the tap or the shower running, and you heard the sound of the cars. I could piece a bit of your morning together. I could tell that you had coffee in the morning or tea. I could tell that you had a shower, possibly. I could tell that you drove to work or you were in traffic, something like that. So yeah, let's have a listen. Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought the audio was playing. So I need to do something with my share and be able to share audio. So please give me a second. Let me quickly do that. Okay, so I'm gonna play it again. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so let's listen again. Okay, someone, okay, good, good, good. So we're getting the setting. I want a story. Can you create a story from that? Deep underground, exploding rush. So what could have happened? What, now we're being creative. Based on the sounds we heard, what could have happened? Okay. Oh, thank you, Theano. There was a big thunderstorm. I was driving, the weather got worse and worse. Yeah, because I would have gone with the crime stories too. Thunder roaring and tells me about, okay. All right, thanks. I love that idea. Thank you, Kishore, teaching adjectives. Yeah. Okay, someone survived bomb. So, yeah, what kind of story? On a cold, windy day, there was a knock at the door and a lot of cars whooshing by, and suddenly there was a nuclear explosion or there was a bomb. Industrial espionage. Okay, so very good. Workers at a factory. So, and the beauty of this is that each learner will have a different thing to say. Patricia says, I was driving when my car stopped and I didn't know what to do. Excellent. Maybe there was a loud bang coming from the engine. I was late to the bus stop, so I missed my bus. I had to wait by the road to board a taxi. Thank you. Excellent. So these are just examples of ways that we can use the sound to get our learners thinking, to get them creating. And these are short tasks. They can be done in 5, 10 minutes. And then we go back to review, we go back to improve upon them. We have, a feedback session, and the learners also reflect, they share the stories. Yeah. So thank you, Claudia. I also love the idea when I got to learn a pity. I can't remember the exact author that I got this from, but I know it was from the ISTA that happened in the US earlier this year. Okay, great. Oops. Okay, now it doesn't want to stop. All right. Thank you. So we're going to do another quick activity. I hope I'm not giving you too many tasks to do. So I have these pictures numbered 1 to 17. I'd like you to tell me the form of storytelling you see in each number. You don't have to do all 17, so you could just pick a number and say what type of storytelling it is. Yeah, storytelling does teach empathy. 1, folk tales. Interesting. 15, mime. Okay, okay. Yes, you're all doing well, but I want us to look at it from the perspective of the forms we talked about. So is it oral? Is it visual? Thank you. Picture story. So that's visual. Music, is that visual or oral? Oral. Okay, oral. Thank you. 17, 15, visual. That's like shadow puppetry. Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And the interesting thing is that some of these don't actually have a right or wrong answer. Yes, there's writing, there's the written storytelling. I think that's the one that's kind of just obvious, but it could also be a visual storytelling, asking you to tell a story from the picture. So a lot of it mixes two forms, more than one form. And depending on how you look at it, it could be different things. Aha, what kind of storytelling is dancing? So that's really interesting. And I love that question because if they're dancing without any words, it's it's visual to me. Or we could give it a whole new genre and call it, you know, kind of static. I don't know. But to me, it's visual. If there's just a dance without any words, but if they're dancing and singing and they're telling a story, then it's oral. The dance is just sort of supporting the story. So that's where it gets interesting. Yeah, physical storytelling, maybe Amanda. So we could start something along those lines. But these are really interesting concepts, and this is just giving us the listening. So listening would be oral storytelling. Yes, yes. Thank you so much. So just telling us that there's so many different types of story, practical maybe stories that we can use with our learners, and we can invent our own. Yeah. So great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So when Jay says if there's music with a dance, it can be a combination of visual and acoustic. Yes, yes. All right. 10 is sound. Okay, yes, because he has, so that's oral. He has a microphone, and I think he also has a musical instrument. I can't see very clearly, but I know that there's shadow puppetry there. Excellent job. So number one, though, I want to speak to number one, is visual, and it's a cave painting. So our ancestors were telling stories orally and visually way before we actually got the hang of writing. So that is a visual story depicting the glory of the hunt for the caveman. So that is something that we need to know, that all of these might not be new. Oh, okay. Cuisinaire rods to tell a story. That's interesting. I would say it's an oral story, but the cuisinaire rods are like supporting the story. Maybe a bit like using props, but it depends exactly on what you're using them for and how you're using them. So yeah, Amanda, we could think more about that. Okay, 15 seems to be a film story. That is a mime. And in my opinion, that would be visual. They're doing a pantomime and there are no words. So that would be visual. You have to decipher the story from what you're seeing. All right, awesome, awesome. Teaching through movement and sound. So that's another name. We could have a name. Someone said acoustic. Yeah, so there's a lot we're learning from each other and a lot to dig into. For those of us that like research, we could dig more into that. Okay, so before we go more into the meat of the talk today, which of these which of the four language skills, so listening, speaking, reading, and writing, is best practiced through the use of storytelling in the classroom? So we've seen oral storytelling, visual storytelling, digital, so many. Okay, Tana says all four. Yeah, so stories are by nature multimodal. Yes, yes. So despite the fact that I was telling the story, I used my hands. So there is that visual component, and it's always I was moving around. Yeah, all okay, but it really helps listening and speaking. Thank you. Claudia says mainly oral. Claudia says speaking and listening, speaking and listening. All of them. Yes, yes, yes. Primarily listening can be adapted. Okay. All right, thank you. Depends on the teacher. Yes, so we're all right. And it depends on the teacher. Um, Naturally, it lends itself to listening and speaking, but just like we've seen, even before going into some of the activities, that we could do reading, we could do writing with it, because you read my questions before I told the story, you wrote your answers, and you've written a number of stories for me, 3-sentence stories. So yeah. Okay, so there's a question here. I'll try to get to it at the end. I hope I do remember. Martha, you could put in the Q&A so that we don't forget. Thank you. All right. So we're looking at listening, and when we're telling stories, and in any situation, let's try to make sure that even though listening is a receptive skill, it's not a passive skill. What can we get the learners to do? So here are some of the sub skills. I'm going to be racing through some of my slides now so that I can finish. We have active listening. So they should be listening actively. There should be something they're listening for. Listening for just getting the general idea, listening for detail, listening to infer. So sometimes just from the tone of voice, you can infer something. So for those of us that are teachers, we know that tone and expression does affect meaning. So if I say, yeah, I have this very common one. I'm sure I heard it somewhere. I can't remember. But if I say, give me the bag, maybe I want to borrow something from the bag. That's so nice and has no negative connotations. But if I say, give me the bag, so maybe I'm stealing from you or I'm angry with you. So they could listen and try to infer what is happening, the emotion of the person, the situation, listening to evaluate. So at the end, we're going to be listening and giving like our own view of what we listen to. That's listening to evaluate. And then there's extensive listening. So listening to podcasts, listening to news, where we want the learners to listen for extended periods. Okay, so what are some of the activities that we can do with listening? So before listening, we can work on vocabulary, just like I did with the pictures. Yes, storytelling does develop analytical skills. Thank you. We can work on predictions. I asked you, do you think it'll be happy or sad? We could do some brainstorming and discussion to activate prior knowledge. If I was in the physical classroom, I'd ask about if anyone has ever been to a dinner party, what does it take to go to, stuff like that. And I would give the purpose and instruction for listening before the story. So I did tell you to write down adjectives, and I think I got a few in the chats. I also asked for which language function could be taught, and I also got some of that in the chats. All right. So while listening, some of the things we can do, listen and do, so we can have the learners, whenever you hear the sound, if you hear me say chop, you chop, you pretend to be chopping. Listen and respond. So a lot of, especially with children's stories or African stories, we have a lot of call and response, a lot of chants, excuse me, that can be used. And then we have listen and draw, we have gap fill. So that could be like a comprehension, listen and write, something like what's done in the IELTS listening tasks. And this is an example of listen and draw. And that this was something I learned from David Heathfield. We call it a story map. So basically, you ask the learners to draw what they hear from the story, and they're able to do that. So my story starts here, dog, and hungry tortoise's house, and then it keeps going, dog and tortoise dig up yams, and then the farmer appears and tortoise hides, and finally dog lives with farmer forever. So I don't have time to tell that story, but even from my story map, you have an idea of what has happened in that story, and learners can retell the story from their story map. But this is something they would be doing while they're listening, and it's very basic drawings, doesn't have to be just stickman, nothing too elaborate. So that's something they could do while listening. And after listening, we have the comprehension questions. We could have them retell, we could discuss the story, the themes, the lesson, and we could also, look at what we're learning from the tone. I think we mentioned that already. Okay, so how does storytelling support reading? Reading is also a receptive skill, but storytelling, listening to stories and telling stories helps the learners to develop a story schema. And that helps them also in their reading comprehension. They understand the way a story goes and they know what to look out for, the beginning, the middle, the end, the climax, the resolution, whatever words we want to teach them, depending on their level. It also helps with comprehension skills like making predictions, inferences, drawing conclusions, which are all very important for good readers. Storytelling is wonderful for vocabulary. I just love that. And that's related to the second, second to the last point, where with oral storytelling, you can use words that are at a higher rate, especially with children, than they can ordinarily read. And then this helps them getting those in context. And then when they do get to meet them in books, it's easier for them to understand and to appreciate. And storytelling is very expressive. It helps the learners to model fluent reading. So they listen to you telling a story fluently. And when want to tell, they're also being expressive. And you can tell them that when you're reading, you also need to be as if you're speaking a normal like your normal speaking, or as if you're telling a story. It shouldn't be breaking and things like that. Okay, so we're gonna move fast. What are some of the activities we can do with reading? Picture reading, so we've looked at the visual. I think somebody did mention that. Yep. Okay, so Pierre, I'm not sure I understand your question, but we'll look at that towards the end. Please do put in the Q&A, or you ask it again towards the end. Read and draw, read aloud. So that's also a very good way to practice, speaking, but it's reading also. And then you're getting their pronunciations, you're getting their punctuations when they're reading the story aloud. Do they know how to use punctuations? We have what we call readers theater. We could check that out. Story sequencing, find the word. So I just like the idea, for example, if I have a list of words and I just tell the learners to listen to my story and then circle the words that they hear on their sheet that are in the story. So they're reading the words from the sheet and they're also listening to the story. So that's find the word. We have jigsaw reading, where different learners are reading different components of the story and they need to piece it all together. There's listening, read and listen, so basically comprehension. So they could read and you'd ask the questions orally, or they could read and answer the questions in written form. Read and match, read and retell. So read and match could have to do with definitions. It could have to do with anything within the answers of the story, and that just supports all the different reading sub skills that we have over here. Okay, so we're moving on to speaking. Speaking is the first productive skill. So that means the learners are producing something. And stories, like we mentioned, expose learners to natural, authentic speech. It promotes self-expression. Everybody has their own unique way of telling a story. So if anybody retells the story that I told, there's going to be something a bit different. Interestingly, even if a story is written down and I read and Simon reads, and then we both have to retell it without reading from the book, we're going to tell it in a bit of a different way. The key points will be the same, but some of the words will be different. Some of the ways we express ourselves are also going to be different. And then it models pronunciation. We talked about that a little bit when we're talking about listening also. And it could be used as a scaffold to encourage speaking. This might be a good place to think about the idea of translanguaging, of having the learners bring folk tales from their home and try to translate them into English for us, or use those supports. All right, so storytelling reduces speaking anxiety because there's that repetitive element to storytelling. And if they hear it once, they can retell it because they're not hearing it for the first time. It's not coming like straight from their brains. And even if it is coming straight from their brains, if they tell it once the first time, by the second or third time they're telling the same story, they're going to say it much better. They're going to be less anxious. And storytelling in itself is not an anxiety-inducing process. It's something that binds, and it's normally in a small, comfortable setting, except if you have to tell a story to a really large crowd, and we wouldn't have our beginning learners do that. Okay, so what are some of the sub skills? Pronunciation, expression, language. Here we're talking about grammar. Also sentence structure, fluency, coherence, cohesion. Body language also a very important part of speaking, because our expressions are supposed to match what we say, and we need to learn this because I'm not sure if it's a cultural thing but a personal thing. Some of us do have the stoic look all the time, and we need to learn that, okay, there's some kind of body language that goes with some kind of language, and storytelling helps with that excitement that you show, or that's quiet while you're telling a story, while you're listening to a story. So some of the speaking activities include telling a story, retelling a story, stepping through a story. That's another interesting thing I learned from David, where the learners are taking a step for every sentence of the story. So they start that with the teacher, and then after some time they do it on their own. And by the time they step through the story once or twice, they can actually tell the story by heart. Summarizing a story, role plays, acting. Somebody mentioned role play earlier. Story swap is when they're in pairs and they exchange stories, and one person comes to tell the other person's story. Story chains, I think somebody also mentioned that, where you pass on the story from one person to another. Story making boxes, basically you just bring a box of props, tools to your classroom, and you just have them randomly pick out something and create a story. So that's really good for creativity. Discussions, so for the older learners, the more advanced learners, you could talk about themes, connections, personal and global character traits. You could have debates about stories. Next, we move on to writing, which is the final productive skill. And writing is supported through the visualization and creativity that story brings. It also, storytelling, especially oral, helps us with that concept of sequencing and coherence. I think someone said that earlier too. Yeah, okay, maybe not for storytelling generally, but for my story that I talked about. And then you have complex sentence structures that are used and introduced in a way that they get it in context, figurative language. And it's just a foundation for different types of writing. And we're going to look at some of the writing activities that we could do. And the sub skills are just by the side over there, so that you can actually see, depending on which skill you want to improve with your learners, what activity are you going to ask them to do. Write a summary of a story, write a review of a story, write a story, create a comic, write a play, create a poster, a book cover, an ad, complete a story. So maybe you give an incomplete story, write a different ending to a story, write from a different character's point of view, or write a story blog. So there's so much that we could do related to writing of stories. There are so many types of stories. And I think we had people mention most of those that are here. And this is not exhaustive. Someone mentioned ballads, poetry. Some of that is also some form of storytelling. So we've learned so much as teachers, and there are so many things we can do. We know our classes, and we need to find ways to adapt the stories to best suit our learners. So if your learners are businessmen, what kind of stories are you going to tell that's going to engage them? They may feel a bit bored with my college story, and they may think it's a waste of their hard-earned money if they're paying you a lot to teach you, to be taught by you. But if you have a story, and thank you, because connections are everything. If you have a story that interests them, there's a case study from the business world, and you're able to break it down to their level, even though they're not speaking at C1 yet, but you bring a case study and break it down to a B1 level, they can appreciate the story, and they will struggle to contribute to that story. So we need to also adapt the language level to suit the learners, and not just their age, not just their levels, but also their ages. Include songs and chants to engage younger learners. I found that teachers also love songs and chants, but maybe, like I said, not some academics. So you need to know who's with you. Integrate technology. Tech is here to stay, and the teens and young adults especially love that. They're the natives. So if you just add a little bit, they will even find more ways to use technology with storytelling. Make learning objectives clear. That makes it easier for them to, understand what they're doing and not think that it's a waste of time. Because sometimes they just feel, oh, storytelling, you're wasting our time. Teach us the grammar, teach us the English. But if you let them know that, okay, by listening to the story, by telling the story, we're actually learning these things, they'll be more invested. Encourage participation. Sometimes it's not easy, but with time, and if they see that it's not so high stakes, they will be willing to participate. Utilize groupings and other interactions. I'd love to see some other ways that we have been able to adapt stories and storytelling. I saw someone share something about, okay, thank you, Sandra. I get my clients to tell stories, and then I retell their story. Yeah, exactly. So many ways that we can adapt it to different types and levels of people. Okay, so what else could we do? Try AI. So this is an AI generated version of my superhero persona. I'm super R. So I would encourage learners to create their own character and then create a story. I could give them this and tell them to create a story about me being a superhero. And I'm sure they would make me fly. We could also have them write the setting for the prompt and then ask the AI to create the story. And then we can edit together in class. We could have AI generate images for our story. So the kids or learners could write the stories in class and have the generative AI create a story. Okay, so this was done with ChatGPT. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Story improv. This I really love. We've run out of time. If not, I would have put my Simon on the spot to do this with me. So just ABC improv. It's a kind of storytelling session. So where two people are going to be telling the story, or the group of people, but each person must start the next line of the story with the next letter of the alphabet. So for example, if we're starting with A, my story could be, all of a sudden, there was a loud noise. Before you knew it, commotion everywhere. Cases of gold fell down from the sky. Definitely the greatest day of my life. Something like that. So I stopped on D, but we could have it going on and on. With the question improv, we'd be telling a story where everybody's answering with a question. So I'm asking you a question, but you're not allowed to answer with a statement. You answer with another question. A one-word story and one-sentence story are like story chains, but each person is saying one word in the one-word story, and each person is saying one sentence in the one-sentence story. Okay, so this is just a brief about some of the steps to creating a digital story. These are two students in my classroom when we did our digital story. And I just wanted to share this because we had only my laptop. My class had oh, one word story. I love that one. I had 18 learners, and we're in a relatively well-off school. We have a projector, we have internet, but the learners don't have their own personal devices. So I had to use my own device, but we're able to co-create. At this point, they were actually recording their voices for the video that we created together. And it's just something that can be done when there's a will, there's a way. And sometimes you kind of ask them to go home, because my learners actually have access at home, their phones and their parents' phones, and they create very interesting digital stories. So yeah, I think I've made good time. I was thinking to share my learners video, but I'm not sure we'll have enough time for that. But I do want to end with this quote from Kelly Fanson. It says, storytelling is a felt experience, a tool that teachers at any educational level and field of study can use to elevate engagement in learning for their students. So Kelly's telling us here that it's not just for English, but isn't that just the best tool for a language, storytelling? So please do start planning on the stories you're going to be using. I have a YouTube channel that's a bit dormant, but I have some interesting stories on it. If you want to look at it, it's called Teaching with EI, Emotional Intelligence. And I had a series called EI Through Stories. So there's some really nice stories there, if I do say so myself. Thank you very much. Here are some of my references. And yeah, I guess it's time for questions. Hey, Simon.
Hello,
Hello,
hello. Well,
hello.
thank
Oh,
you
thank you.
very much for that. I'll let you catch your breath for a second because that was a whirlwind of ideas and information, overspilling. It's fantastic, and I'm very glad this has been recorded so I can go back and harvest some more of those ideas. But I think I'm just to start with going back to what you said at the very beginning, that I think the quote here that we all love stories, and I think you've shown there that stories can be anything. They can be one word, they can be a sentence, they can be written, they can be oral, they can include music and movement and dance and all sorts of things. So, and you also showed from our point of view as language teachers that telling a story, listening to a story involves listening, reading, writing, speaking, and also mediating as well. Like you said, you hear a story and then you give the essence of the story to someone, or you summarize it, or you write a report about it, or all of these everyday activities. So I think, yeah, a real range of things for us to think about there. So we've had lots of nice questions coming in. Thank you to everyone that's asked them. And I'll start with one that's sort of quite a few people have asked this. You mentioned earlier on in the webinar about using stories with more advanced students. But the question here has come, what do you do with the lowest level of students when they're struggling to form sentences or know all the right words? How do you encourage them to interact with stories?
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. And sometimes they're actually the easiest to use stories with because you can focus on one word stories, on picture stories. You can start with picture stories, and with their limited vocabulary, they have something to say. And you can scaffold with movement. So for example, when I started my story, I did use some movement to introduce vocabulary. And that's a really good way for young learners or for early beginner learners. And I had 5 words. We could have just 2 words a day. and we could have just a short stories, nothing too fancy, and that supports them. I think during the talk, I also mentioned like translanguaging and allowing them to use their native languages or their mother tongues as a scaffold. So interestingly, even with my learners in Nigeria, English is the lingua franca. But even with my learners, there was once I had a story swap where the theme was on culture, and I said, tell your partner the culture, something about your culture that you've experienced. So a wedding, a naming ceremony, whatever it is, a festival. And one of the learners insisted on telling his story in Hausa. And I was like, okay, they were working in their pair. Initially, I wanted to intervene, but I just felt I should hold on. And interestingly, they were able to, when it was time to tell the class, he said it in English. So I think saying it in his native language, first of all, had him getting the ideas out, and then he was able to produce it in English. So yeah, I think it's something that is very good for younger or new learners, especially if you can get a hold of stories they are familiar with in their own languages. So a lot of folk tales have similar, tropes sometimes. Some are so international. We all know, I don't want to say we all know, but a number of stories are familiar among cultures. And as a teacher, it's fine if you also dig into their own culture and bring that to the classroom. So you're giving them permission to bring their own stories in the class, and they can use that as stepping stones. So it takes more work, but it's easy to do, I think, once you get the hang of it.
And I suppose it's often what we do with very young children. They might not understand all the words, but we read them stories at night or during the day anyway, and they're learning a kind of, it's, I guess, connected to input theory. They're learning as they're going, building up. And as you said, repeating the stories. Every time you repeat, they'll learn a bit more and they'll understand a bit more each time. Interesting.
Exactly, exactly. And there's that listening phase of learning a language too. So let's tell them the stories, they will pick up on it.
Yeah, that's a very important point, right? That listening stage, and actually all of the input they're getting, it's all kind of registering and they're figuring out the sounds and all these other things, added with the movement and the pictures and all the other wonderful ideas that you said there. And I think that goes back to what Pierre was saying in his comment there, that another while listening activity is a great one. If you're telling a story, the students can draw bits of the story as you're going along, and that kind of gives you an idea of what they're comprehending, and also very creative. They get to sort of draw as they are envisioning it in their heads as you're speaking. So going from that sort of more receptive thing, a couple of people were asking, when it comes to writing stories, do you have any tips or tricks to make that more interesting? Because a couple of people said their students just don't, they get bored, they turn off after a while. What do you do in your classes to make that exciting?
Okay, so the use of pictures like that or social media is always interesting. So if I share a social media story and they give their own feedback or they give a story based on their own experiences, that is a bit more interesting for the learners. That makes it maybe not more interesting, but easier, because a lot of them do find it difficult to write, is when we've talked the story through first. So when they exchange the story with a partner before they write the story, that helps and really supports them in producing detail. Because I do have a number of learners that would give me really short stories if I ask them to write. But if I ask them to tell the story, they would give it in a more elaborate way. And sometimes I also encourage them, if it's going to be homework, like record your story first and then try to transcribe it. So that sometimes also helps.
Ah, that's interesting. So moving from sort of oral into or spoken into written, like you said, which is great. And a couple of people asked as well, with that, when they're creating stories, do you ever get students to write them together? Sort of collaborative writing, does that work for you, or do you think it should be something that's more independent?
I think it's a good idea. It's not something I do often. I'm not sure I've actually ever really done it in the class. So for example, when we were creating our digital story, we did it collaboratively in the class, and they were suggesting, and I was actually writing it out on the board, and I asked them to copy it down. So, and it turned out quite well. It turned out quite nice. And at the end, we did some edits. Oh, can we get a more powerful word for this? And can we add this? And I know my students have been involved in a competition that was actually collaborative story writing. But I haven't done that much of it. I've done more of the story chain, so oral collaborative storytelling. I've done a lot of
Mm.
that. And it turns out well. I know I did one for a particular class and I recorded them because I recorded them. This was a younger class, they were year three. So I asked them to tell the story. They were going around, and at the end, I said someone should retell the entire story, and they told me they had forgotten. But fortunately for me, I had them on recording, so I played it back to them, and then they were able to retell the story. So I think it's a good one. I haven't done too much of it, but I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, well, that sounds like a wonderful idea as well. Again, that going into that repetition, right? Hearing a story more than once, reading a story or telling a story more than once in different forms. And as you said, it's not about getting it precise and, doing the same exact thing each time. It changes each time, which is wonderful. Um, uh, and I think it was important that you said there as well that stories can be, they can be real stories from real life. They can be made up stories. They can be very big stories. They can be short stories. Like everything is a story, basically, is what we're saying,
Yeah, yeah.
which is good for those that a couple of people are saying here, those that don't feel the students are that creative, well, they can write something real about themselves. It's still a story, right? In this sense.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
And sometimes real life is the most interesting story.
It is. The truth is stranger than fiction sometimes.
Exactly. There are a couple of other smaller questions here. One is actually a very big question. I don't think you'll be able to answer it, but I'm going to say here a couple of people saying, it's obvious as you, and having seen some of your videos, you are an excellent storyteller. How do we all get to be as good as you? Is it just practice makes perfect, or is it just a natural gift?
No, it is practice, although I believe I'm gifted because I've had that gift of the gab early on. But with practice, everybody makes a good storyteller. And just think of telling a story about something that happened to you, to your partner, to your child, the way you are enthusiastic, just bring that enthusiasm into classroom. It takes some time, performing. Sometimes you look at it, but it gets better with time.
Excellent. Thank you. One final question, a bit of a housekeeping question. Lots of people are saying there was so much information there. Would you be willing to share your slides with us?
Yes, yes, I will.
Fantastic. All right. So we will put those up on the Trinity College London Transformative Teachers website as well to make sure everyone gets those eventually. So that's fantastic. So sadly, it's just gone 5 o'clock here. That our hour is up. So a huge thank you to everyone who came today. Very interactive and active group with interesting ideas and reactions. Really, really, really great. But the biggest thanks, of course, goes to who I shall now refer to as Super R in your persona, which is great. But thank you so much for agreeing to do this talk and for joining us today and sharing all of those ideas. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. And everyone, we look forward to seeing you again next month for the next Transformative Teachers webinar. Enjoy the rest of your mornings, afternoons, and evenings. And thank you very much for joining us. Bye bye.